The vision of sustaining high-performance cognition well into the later decades of life is not merely a matter of genetic luck, but a result of deliberate biological management. Many individuals operate under the assumption that occasional indulgences or moderate habits are benign, yet neurobiology reveals that certain compounds actively dismantle the neural architecture required for memory and focus. The modern environment offers a plethora of liquid consumables that present themselves as harmless treats or even health aids, while silently eroding the blood-brain barrier and accelerating neuronal decline. By understanding the mechanistic impact of specific ingredients on synaptic plasticity and hormonal regulation, one can pivot from a trajectory of slow degradation to one of preserved vitality. Andrew Huberman posits that the brain remains capable of profound regeneration and maintenance, provided the chemical assaults are systematically removed. This exploration illuminates the specific beverages that compromise neural integrity and offers a framework for protecting the aging mind. The ethanol illusion and the disruption of sleep architecture, the consumption of alcohol, is often rationalized as a necessary social lubricant or a method for decompression after a demanding day. From a neurobiological perspective, however, ethanol functions as a potent solvent that crosses the blood-brain barrier with unrestricted ease, initiating a cascade of suppression across neural networks. The immediate sensation of relaxation is chemically induced by the upregulation of GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and the simultaneous suppression of glutamate, the primary excitatory neurotransmitter. While this creates a temporary feeling of sedation, the subsequent rebound effect destabilizes the delicate balance of neural firing. The brain detects this artificial suppression and compensates by increasing excitability, which manifests as anxiety, fragmented attention, and low-level agitation once the alcohol clears the system. This seesaw effect forces the nervous system into a state of chronic stress management rather than restorative maintenance. The most insidious damage occurs during the period the individual believes they are resting. Sleep architecture is composed of distinct phases, including deep slow-wave sleep and rapid eye movement or REM sleep, which are critical for memory consolidation and emotional processing. The presence of even small amounts of alcohol in the bloodstream significantly suppresses REM sleep, the phase where the brain processes emotional memories and clears metabolic waste. When this phase is consistently truncated, the brain loses its ability to effectively organize new information and purge the toxic byproducts of daily neural activity. Over decades, this deficit accumulates, presenting not just as grogginess, but as a fundamental erosion of cognitive reserve and emotional resilience. A specific metabolite of alcohol, acetaldehyde, poses a direct threat to the cellular integrity of neurons. The liver converts ethanol into acetaldehyde, a compound significantly more toxic than the alcohol itself, which has the potential to damage DNA and disrupt protein synthesis within cells. In the context of the brain, this toxicity contributes to the thinning of the neocortex, the outer layer of the brain responsible for higher-order functions such as planning, logic, and impulse control. Research highlights a linear relationship between regular alcohol intake and a reduction of gray matter volume, suggesting that the brain literally shrinks in response to chronic exposure. This structural degradation is particularly concerning for the aging brain, which is already combating the natural rate of atrophy associated with senescence. It is understandable that the individual seeks a ritual to mark the transition from work to rest, and the glass of wine or spirits has held this place for centuries. The cultural reinforcement of alcohol as a benign pleasure makes it difficult to view it through a strictly biological lens. However, the neurotoxic effects are agnostic to cultural norms or personal justifications. The biological reality is that alcohol disrupts the very mechanisms the brain relies on to repair itself, turning the nightly recovery period into a time of low-grade toxic exposure. Consider the scenario of a person who enjoys 2 glasses of wine with dinner every evening to unwind. They may fall asleep quickly, believing the alcohol has aided their rest, but their sleep tracker would reveal a heart rate that fails to drop to the necessary restorative baseline. Throughout the night, they experience multiple micro-awakenings that they do not remember, resulting in a fragmented sleep structure. The following day, they experience a subtle fog, a slight difficulty in word retrieval, or a reduced threshold for frustration. They attribute this to aging or stress, unaware that it is the direct pharmacological aftereffect of the previous night's beverage. This cycle, repeated over years, accelerates the very decline they fear. The impact extends beyond structural damage to the hormonal systems that govern mood and motivation. Alcohol consumption initially spikes dopamine, the molecule of drive and reward, but this is followed by a prolonged deficit in baseline dopamine levels. This crash below baseline creates a subtle dysphoria, a lack of motivation, and a craving to restore the dopamine peak, driving further consumption. For the aging individual, maintaining healthy dopamine levels is crucial for zest, motor control, and a willingness to engage with the world. A beverage that systematically lowers this baseline robs the golden years of their potential vibrancy. There's a persistent belief in the concept of hormesis regarding alcohol, the idea that small doses provide a beneficial stress response. While hormesis is valid for stressors like cold exposure or exercise, modern data increasingly suggests that no amount of alcohol provides a net health benefit to the brain. The carcinogenic and neurotoxic properties outweigh any potential cardiovascular slight edge, which itself is often overstated. The trade-off is a direct exchange of short-term relaxation for long-term neuropreservation. As the brain ages, its ability to metabolize toxins and repair DNA damage naturally diminishes. Introducing a compound that actively hinders these processes is akin to removing the scaffolding from a building while trying to renovate it. The removal of alcohol allows the brain to re-engage its natural restorative cycles, often leading to a profound improvement in clarity and mood within weeks. The restoration of REM sleep alone acts as a powerful anti-aging therapy for the mind. The shift away from alcohol requires finding new protocols for relaxation that do not rely on sedation. By understanding that the relaxation from alcohol is chemically borrowed from the next day's happiness, the individual can make an informed choice to protect their cognitive assets. The preservation of the neocortex and the hippocampus is worth the adjustment of evening rituals. This opens the door to examining other liquid culprits that masquerade as harmless hydration. What ritual can I adopt that provides genuine rest without compromising my brain's recovery? The insulin cascade of high-fructose beverages. The modern food environment is saturated with liquid sugar, primarily in the form of high-fructose corn syrup found in sodas and sweetened drinks. Unlike glucose, which is utilized by every cell in the body for energy, fructose is metabolized almost exclusively by the liver. When consumed in liquid form, it arrives at the liver in a massive, concentrated wave, overwhelming the organ's capacity to process it efficiently. This metabolic bottleneck forces the liver to convert the excess fructose into liver fat and triglycerides, which are then released into the bloodstream. For the brain, this process signals a state of metabolic chaos that manifests as inflammation and insulin resistance. Insulin is not merely a regulator of blood sugar. It is a critical signaling molecule within the brain, influencing neuronal survival and synaptic plasticity. When the body is inundated with liquid sugar, cells become resistant to insulin's message, a condition that extends to the brain itself. This cerebral insulin resistance impairs the ability of brain cells to take up glucose for fuel, leading to a state of neuronal starvation, even in the presence of abundant blood sugar. This energy crisis in the brain is strongly linked to the development of cognitive decline and memory loss, as neurons lacking fuel eventually atrophy and die. The consumption of sugary soda creates a violent oscillation in blood glucose levels. The initial spike provides a burst of artificial energy, but it is inevitably followed by a reactive hypoglycemic crash. During this crash, the brain perceives a survival threat, triggering the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones, while useful in acute danger, are corrosive to the hippocampus, the brain's memory center, when elevated chronically. The individual experiences this biological roller coaster as mood swings, brain fog, and anxiety, often reaching for another sugary drink to self-medicate the very symptoms the sugar caused. It is important to acknowledge that the drive for sweetness is a primal evolutionary mechanism designed to guide humans toward calorie-dense foods. The availability of hyperpalatable liquid sugar hijacks this ancient circuitry, providing a supernormal stimulus that the brain was never designed to handle. This is not a failure of willpower, but a mismatch between ancient biology and the modern food supply. Recognizing this mismatch allows for a strategic rather than emotional response to dietary choices. Imagine an afternoon setting where fatigue begins to set in around 3 p.m. The person reaches for a cola, seeking a lift to power through the final hours of work. For 20 minutes, they feel alert and focused as dopamine and blood sugar surge. However, an hour later, they are fighting heavy eyelids and a scattered mind, unable to concentrate on complex tasks. This lack of focus is not just fatigue. It is a physiological impairment caused by the rapid withdrawal of fuel from the brain. Over time, this daily cycle desensitizes the brain's reward system, requiring more stimulation to achieve the same level of focus. Visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat that accumulates rapidly from fructose consumption, acts as an independent organ of inflammation. It releases pro-inflammatory cytokines that cross the blood-brain barrier and activate microglia, the brain's immune cells. Chronic activation of microglia leads to a state of neuroinflammation, where these cells begin to attack healthy neurons and synapses. This low-grade inflammation is a silent driver of depression and cognitive slowing in older adults. Reducing liquid sugar is one of the most effective ways to lower this systemic inflammatory burden. A critical molecule for brain health is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. This protein supports the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth of new synapses, essentially facilitating learning and memory. High sugar intake has been shown to suppress the production of BDNF, thereby inhibiting the brain's capacity to adapt and learn new information. For someone over 60, preserving high levels of BDNF is essential for maintaining neuroplasticity and cognitive flexibility. The elimination of sugary beverages removes a major brake on this regenerative system. The resolution to the energy regulation problem lies in stabilizing blood glucose. By removing the volatile spikes and crashes caused by liquid sugar, the brain receives a steady, consistent supply of fuel. This stability allows for sustained attention and stable mood regulation throughout the day. The transition away from sweet drinks restores the sensitivity of the insulin receptors, allowing the brain to efficiently access the energy it needs without the toxic byproducts of fructose metabolism. While intense physical exertion can temporarily buffer some of the metabolic impact of sugar, the sedentary nature of modern life means that for most people, liquid sugar has no place in a metabolic budget. The cost is paid directly by the brain's vascular and neural systems. The clarity that returns once the glucose roller coaster is halted is often described as lifting a veil, revealing a sharper, more resilient mind beneath. Why do I continue to seek energy from sources that ultimately drain my vitality? The deceptive signal of artificial sweeteners in an effort to avoid the caloric penalty of sugar. Many turn to diet sodas containing artificial sweeteners like aspartame, sucralose, or saccharin. The logic seems sound. Enjoy the sweet taste without the glycemic spike. However, the neurobiology of sweetness is complex, involving a gut-brain axis that anticipates calories when the tongue tastes sweet. When an artificial sweetener hits the tongue, the brain prepares the digestive system for an influx of energy that never arrives. This mismatch creates a prediction error in the nervous system, potentially driving cravings for real calories later in the day to reconcile the debt. The impact of non-nutritive sweeteners extends to the gut microbiome, the vast ecosystem of bacteria residing in the digestive tract. Emerging research indicates that certain artificial sweeteners can alter the composition of these bacterial colonies, reducing the population of beneficial microbes and encouraging the growth of those associated with metabolic dysfunction. Since the gut produces the vast majority of the body's serotonin and communicates directly with the brain via the vagus nerve, a disrupted microbiome can translate into altered mood, anxiety, and cognitive fogginess. The health of the gut is inextricably linked to the health of the brain. Despite containing zero sugar, some artificial sweeteners have been observed to trigger an insulin response. The sweet taste alone can be enough to prime the pancreas to release insulin. When insulin circulates without glucose to manage, it can lead to a drop in blood sugar and a subsequent increase in appetite. This disruption of insulin sensitivity contributes to the same metabolic inflexibility seen with sugar consumption, albeit through a different pathway. The brain, requiring steady glucose, finds itself in a confused metabolic state. Consider the individual who drinks several diet sodas a day, believing they are making a health-conscious choice. They might find themselves inexplicably hungry or craving carbohydrates in the evening. They may also experience persistent digestive discomfort or bloating, which they treat as a separate issue. Unbeknownst to them, the chemical sweeteners are maintaining a dysbiotic gut environment that signals distress to the brain. The diet soda is not a neutral replacement, but a biologically active compound with unintended consequences for neural signaling. It is true that for a diabetic or someone with severe obesity, transitioning from full sugar soda to diet soda can serve as a temporary harm reduction step. It eliminates the massive fructose load. However, as a long-term strategy for optimal brain health, it falls short. The goal is to recalibrate the palate so that the hypersweetness of these chemicals is no longer desired, rather than tricking the brain with empty signals. The brain operates best when sensory inputs match metabolic realities. The consumption of these synthetic compounds keeps the individual locked in a cycle of craving sweetness. This dependence prevents the appreciation of subtle flavors in natural foods, narrowing the dietary range. By continuing to stimulate the reward pathways with intense artificial sweetness, the dopamine system remains conditioned to seek immediate, high-intensity gratification. Breaking this cycle allows the dopamine system to reset, making whole foods and natural hydration satisfying again. The chemical nature of these sweeteners means they are xenobiotics, foreign substances that the body must process and excrete. While regulatory bodies deem them safe at certain levels, the cumulative effect of daily consumption over decades on a sensitive aging brain remains an area of concern. Minimizing the intake of synthetic compounds aligns with the principle of reducing the total allostatic load on the body. The path to neuroprotection involves simplifying the inputs to the system. Water, electrolytes, and compounds that the body has evolved to recognize create a foundation for reliable physiological function. Removing the chemical confusion of artificial sweeteners clears the communication lines between the gut and the brain. This clarity paves the way for understanding the final category of deceptive beverages. Where in my life am I accepting a counterfeit substitute instead of the real thing? The glycemic trap of concentrated juices. Fruit juice is frequently marketed as a pinnacle of health, a concentrated source of vitamins and vitality. However, the process of juicing strips away the structural fiber of the fruit, leaving behind a liquid that is chemically very similar to soda in terms of sugar concentration. When a person eats an apple, the fiber creates a physical matrix that slows the digestion and absorption of sugar, resulting in a gentle rise in blood glucose. Drinking apple juice, conversely, delivers a rapid blast of fructose that overwhelms the liver and spikes insulin just as aggressively as a soft drink. The vitamins present are often negated by the metabolic damage inflicted by the sugar load. The mechanism of rapid absorption is the core issue. The brain and body are not evolutionarily adapted to process liquid calories of this density. The immediate glycemic spike requires a massive insulin response, which, as previously noted, contributes to insulin resistance over time. For the aging brain, which is already fighting to maintain efficient glucose metabolism, these spikes are particularly damaging. They promote glycation, a process where sugar molecules bind to proteins and fats, forming harmful new molecules called advanced glycation end products. These compounds stiffen blood vessels and impair cellular function, accelerating the aging process of the brain's vascular system. Synthesizing the insights from alcohol, soda, and artificial sweeteners, a clear pattern emerges. The brain thrives on stability and suffers from chemical volatility. Whether it is the depressive suppression of ethanol, the inflammatory spike of fructose, or the confusing signal of aspartame, these drinks all disrupt the homeostatic balance required for optimal cognition. The aging brain is resilient, but it requires a consistent, non-toxic environment to perform its maintenance functions. The removal of these four categories of beverages, alcohol, sugary sodas, diet sodas, and fruit juices, constitutes a powerful protocol for neuroprotection. The most effective hydration strategy relies on water, perhaps enhanced with electrolytes, to ensure cellular absorption. Unsweetened teas and black coffee, in moderation, offer polyphenol and mild stimulation without the metabolic penalties of sugar or the neurotoxicity of alcohol. These beverages support the brain's biochemistry rather than hijacking it. By returning to these foundational fluids, the individual supports the blood-brain barrier, maintains healthy insulin sensitivity, and preserves the structural integrity of the neocortex. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire and adapt, continues until the very end of life. This potential is unlocked when the chemical brakes are released. An individual who eliminates these neurodisruptive drinks often reports a second wind of cognitive clarity, improved memory retention, and a more stable emotional baseline. This is not magic. It is the biological result of allowing the nervous system to function without chronic interference. The promise of age is not inevitable decline, but the accumulation of wisdom supported by a healthy biological vessel. The decision to alter drinking habits is a fundamental investment in the self. It transforms the concept of aging from a passive erosion into an active cultivation of vitality. Every time one chooses water or tea over a neurotoxic alternative, they are voting for the preservation of their memories, their personality, and their independence. The future of the mind is written in the daily choices of the present. What essential need am I trying to meet with these drinks that I can fulfill in a way that honors my body?